what can be very, very helpful is actually writing down the worst possible case scenario. Like, what is the worst possible case scenario? And let's avoid, some horrendous, natural disaster or something like that.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. I have a very young guest today, because normally when we talk about most memorable journeys and the 80s, my guests have to be a certain age, but it doesn't have to be this way. Today, I have a young lady who, when I spoke to her the first time, I felt like I was speaking to a younger version of myself, because she is only 25, but she has already done a lot of stuff in her life. We're going to talk about everything she's done. I will just start off by saying that the first thing she did was being a ballerina, but then things changed. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Jemima Cooper.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here finally. And just, I'm excited where this conversation will take us. We've had great conversations outside this podcast, and I'm sure we'll have some great ones in it too.
Okay, let's impress the people who are listening then today. So tell me, you are a ballerina. You like dancing as a young girl?
Absolutely. So it was all I ever knew, really. One of my first memories is dancing. So I started at 4 years old, as many ballerinas do. And it was completely self-driven. I had read Angelina Ballerina, which is a children's book about a mouse that does dancing. And I fell in love with the concept and wouldn't stop nattering about it until my mum called the local dance school and got me involved. And pretty much from the get-go, it was kind of a duck to water. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And by about 7 years old, I got spotted by the Royal Ballet in England and started being kind of pushed forward at quite a skyrocket rate through the systems. By 9, I was dancing about 14 hours a week and going to Birmingham, going to London to participate in different activations and different groups and things. And then it just kind of went from there. I went off to a dance school, and the whole future was set. I had one kind of goal, one identity, one real focus of where I was kind of heading.
And then what happened?
So it was from the ages of kind of like 4 till 12. It was really, really just everything. And then actually, when I went off to this dance school, I was pushed incredibly hard. So I was put up a year. I was sent off to boarding school where you dance for 6 hours a day, and then you did a little bit of school, and that was a focus, and you did that 6 days a week. And there was a huge amount of pressure on me. So I had actually got a scholarship to the school, which was something that they hadn't given before. They were fighting over me. Basically, there was 3 schools in England, dance schools, that were all wanted me to attend. Basically, I was born, I came out the perfect dancer, even down to kind of the size of my neck, the length of my neck, the position of my arms, and all these ridiculous things that they used to look at. And so they were all wanting me because they knew that I had the body that could be molded to whatever they wanted it to be. Long story short, at the same time as going off to that dance school, my parents got divorced. My family kind of fell apart, and I fell apart within it because the level of stress I was trying to deal with a broken family home, being away from the first time at 12 years old, going through all the teenage things, it was too much. I stepped out, but I was so determined to continue. So I kept on pushing. And then at that stage, unfortunately, my mentor, my dance coach, also became critically ill and could no longer teach me. So I was then left in a state where family life was kind of going crazy. I was going through all sorts of confusions and not understanding kind of who and where I was in the world, going through all that kind of teenage changes, whilst living half a life as an adult, being pushed forward into this very elite dancing world, and then half of me being, still the 12-year-old girl that needed a hug now and then, and try and navigate it all. But I pushed and I pushed. And unfortunately, at about 15 years old, I became critically ill. I ended up in hospital, given the weekend to live, really. They sat my mom down and sat me down and said, the next 48 hours are really touch and go. And I spent a month in hospital with machines attached to me, and then actually came through as I'm here. I came through, pushed through, and did quite a speedy recovery from the condition I had. Remarkably so, in many cases, I kind of defied quite a lot of things, but I always and still believe that it was this drive to get back to dancing. And I was like, not going to lose to anything, including this. So I pushed forward. I did get delayed in my progression as a dancer, but I continued and I pushed through. And at 19, after coming over lots of road bumps, lots of challenges, lots of struggles on my path, I finally got a professional contract at a company. So it was not the Royal Ballet where I'd intended to go. It was not the, Paris Opera Ballet. It wasn't these grand stages, but it was a contract. And at the time, having been in and out of hospitals for 5 years previous, being delayed, I mean, at 19, you're pretty much a grandma in ballet. So I was really getting quite a lot against me, but I got this professional contract with the idea that I would spend a year refining my skill and then go off to America and join probably New York City Ballet or Joffrey Company, which is another dance company from the States, and, go from there. It sounds like, this was, meant to happen and everything was in alignment, and I'd finally got to my goals, or starting that journey. But the thing is, once you've been through an experience like that and you've spent 5 years fighting for yourself, your life, for and all the things that come around that, you have a very different perspective. And one day standing in class, being yelled at by this Russian ballet master who was pretty much everything you see and hear in the kind of horror stories of ballet. It was pretty much summed up in a company. This guy was screaming down our ears, bellowing all these commands at us. And I was standing there in the mirror, holding my arms out, and I saw all the other girls in that studio looking at them and just making sure they were just so, and just adjusting their arms or tweaking their smile. And I was looking at the tree that I could see in the reflection, which was outside the window. There was just like acute focus where I just saw the tree, and I saw the girls around me, and something just hit me inside. It's very, very difficult to explain, but it was just like, I am not meant to be here. There is so much more to give. And I care so much more about the world outside and what's going on much broader than this very self-focused, self-obsessive really world that I was in. And I realized I could not be a part of that, even though unfortunately the company I was in was just horrific, but it's not always the case. But I just had this, I don't know, calling or enlightenment inside that I was meant for something more than this studio. And I turned to the Russian ballet master. I said what I thought of what he was doing to his dancers, and pretty much that I thought he was effectively killing a lot of his dancers because we were dancing 8 hours a day and not even allowed to eat or drink in the studio. It was just horrendous. I told him what was what. I walked out, closed the door, walked out into a very dark, very wet night, which is really quite, it really does set the scene, but it was the way.
A scene in a movie.
Yeah, totally. It was literally like a movie. And I walked out into the London streets at kind of 8 or 9 at night going, holy moly, or a few more expletives. I have no idea what I'm doing now, who I am now. What have I just done? Was that the right decision? And just feeling this massive void of kind of, it was just very empty. It was very lonely. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I did. I walked away.
Didn't you also feel free? Didn't you also feel kind of relief? Because obviously this whole thing made you ill. It's the stress that made you ill.
Well, yes and no. It was a pile up of things. It wasn't ballet specifically. Unfortunately, I had lots of kind of various different life happenings going on. It was a perfect storm of physical conditions, kind of overload of stress, family meltdowns, losing a mentor that was pretty much she was like a mother to me since I'd been kind of since a very, very young age. So it was a perfect storm that contributed to becoming unwell. But I was, having had that experience, I had such a value for my body and my life. And I was like, wow, like I'm so lucky to still be here. I'm so lucky to still be here when many people are not. And even my friends that I'd made in hospitals and things like that were not with us. But did I feel free? And that's interesting. I don't think I felt free till about 10 years after. I don't think it's actually until, the last couple of years that I've felt that freedom or that liberation. I didn't feel free, actually. And this is, I suppose, something quite truthful. Maybe it's not the right thing to say, but I didn't. I felt heavy. I just felt black. Like this massive, all I could see was, I don't know, I don't feel. And that started quite a lot of pushing against any of those feelings and trying to fill it in with doing and being other things and just grasping onto other identities and all sorts of things for quite some time after, I guess.
I remember, I think you were telling me, did you go to Canada? Did you travel after that?
So this was before, actually, when I was 16. So when I'd had this kind of remarkable recovery, and everyone was like, this shouldn't have happened. I really shouldn't have survived what I did in many occasions. But after that, I did feel free at that point. I felt this new lease of life in many ways. And I have an aunt that lives in Vancouver. It was my first long haul travel. Incredible. Just proving that I could go from hospital bed to traveling across the world on my own as a 16-year-old and exploring and experiencing all these amazing things. And Vancouver is the most vibrant city. It's so cool. And there's so many quirky people. And at that stage of my life, having been through what I did, I had no idea who, what, and why I was, what I wanted to do. And I love the quirkiness because I could relate to many I was experimenting in who I wanted to become. And so that was actually before, but it was one of those things that I think about. And one of the main reasons why I didn't want to, or I felt so trapped in the dancing scenario and I wanted more, was because of the sacrifices you'd make. As a dancer, you have about 4 days off a year and you don't even get those if you're lucky. And I couldn't travel. And I'd had this experience of travel and I loved it. And I wanted to do more.
Did you realize then that, thinking of, oh my God, 4 days a year or such little time a year, maybe that also had something to do with the fact that you weren't 100% sure that you wanted to be that? Because there are many different factors in your head that play a role for you to take a decision, because you took quite a drastic decision there when you walked out.
I think it's really interesting in hindsight that you can see these elements very, very clearly. At the time, it was this emotional calling or this emotional enlightenment or whatever you call it. I hadn't made sense of any of it. I just knew there was no other option. I really knew there was no other option. I went with my heart, and I've always been a very emotional person. I'm a dancer, right? So you embody music, you embody a story, and it comes forward in emotion. So I am a very emotional person. And I went on that. I mean, yes, in hindsight, I can see all the tick boxes and the sacrifices I was making and the loss of things I loved in life for the gain of this one thing was a constant battle for me, and still is. Elizabeth and I were just having a conversation just before this podcast that I'm currently looking at moving countries, and there's always pluses and minuses of everything, and I want to do it all. I want to go. I want to travel the world. I want to do all the things, and
you should. Should. I was just telling to my daughter last night, from the age of 18 until the age of 31, no, actually 34, I had never lived anywhere longer than a year and a half.
That sounds very similar to me. I mean, yes, I've moved away now, but I'm definitely I do like to move all around the place. One thing I do really feel though, is I like one thing that grounds me. Something has to be constant and everything else can move. And it's interesting because my mentor, my dance coach was that. So I could deal with the family stuff. I could deal with going to ballet school, then coming back. But when that one constant left or that constant stopped, then I struggled. And it's the same kind of now. Like I've traveled, quite a lot. I travel every month and I'm all over the place and I live out of bags and my work changes and I start new business ventures and all sorts of things are all over the place. Or recently I've made some changes in my kind of athleticism and so much changes. And I love that. I search the change. Like Tim Ferriss said, it's not happiness and sadness, it's excitement or boredom. And I think that's really, really true. I love the excitement. I love the different things.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, happiness is a big word anyway. Happiness is nobody is always happy. That's not possible. But boredom is sad. Now you live in Spain. You live in Mallorca.
Yeah.
But you're originally from the UK. How did you end up in Mallorca? Why did you go to why Spain?
I really wish I had a better reason for this. I really should, craft some stories or something. There is really no reason I ended up in Spain. Really, I shouldn't have ended up in Spain. Like it was just by chance. I was in fact meant to move to Boulder, Colorado in March 2020. So on the 8th of March 2020, my flight was booked. My visa application was in process. I was going to go out to Boulder, figure out where to live. Whilst that was going on, I was going to, and I'd kind of outstayed my 3 months in America. I'd come back. One thing Elizabeth has cut out, I ended up as an endurance triathlete, but that's a story for another time. So I was going to come back, travel around Europe, race in the European season, and then September 2020, move to Boulder and start my life there. And obviously, March 8th, 2020, that flight never happened.
Yeah, because on March 11th, the corona became a pandemic because I flew to Argentina on that day. Big mistake, but go on.
So, and I wonder, how different life would have been. But I'd given up my flat. I'd packed everything away. Everything was set up for America. So I ended up back with my mum, back with my family over the pandemic, which is, a blessing and a struggle, as many will relate to. But at the time also, I was like, okay, well, my plan A was to go and race elite level triathlon. And I was a director for a sports marketing company. So I was going to take that forwards. Races didn't happen. And I don't really like sitting still. So I was like, okay, I can't race this year. What can I do? Well, let's go diving into business, my other kind of interest. And I scaled a marketing agency very, very effectively, very, very quickly. Too quickly and too effectively that by 8 months in, I was burnt to an absolute crisp and everything was crumbling. Together with, the stress of the pandemic, being at home when you're 25 or 20, whatever, or 23. And I was like, I have to get out of this. I had also, I think, been really, really struggling on knowing what I wanted. And therefore I was listening to other people's shoulds and musts. I'd wanted to move abroad since I was 18. After that trip to Canada, when I was 16, I applied for residency in Canada, or the kind of student visa kind of deal, until my parents said that maybe finishing my A-levels was a better idea and put an end to that. I'd tried to go to like Thailand and do all these things, but every time people around me, their worries with, oh, you can't do that. What if you got ill? What if insurance was difficult, all of these things. And I was embodying other people's fears for me. And I got to this point where going, I can't live someone else's life anymore. I'm now over the dance. That happened. I'm not fully fixed from it. You don't retire at 19, you give 16 years of your life to something, walk away unscathed. And I thought I had, and it doesn't work that way. But I got to this point, again, I didn't really have the answer, but I knew what I was in wasn't right. I was also faced by the fact that it was, the Brexit situation. So if I didn't get into Europe, I wasn't going to get into Europe. And I couldn't get to America because we weren't allowed in. Mm-hmm. And so my boss, I was working with America, goes, Jem, I know you want to move. Well, a couple of our athletes go training in this place called Mallorca. Have you ever, heard of that, been there? No, I've never been to Spain before. No idea about Mallorca, but the pictures look nice. And 4 days later, I'd found somewhere to stay and I'd booked a flight. I rocked up in Mallorca. My first flight, it was all a bit complicated. My first flight was cancelled and I ended up by getting here on the 18th of December, which left me 4 working days before Brexit deadline to get my documents in. Mid-pandemic, they just went into another lockdown in Spain, which was pretty fierce. And I rocked up, didn't know anyone, didn't know the island, couldn't speak a word of Spanish. I was pretty good at French, but it wasn't going to help me here. And started my next phase.
I think that's another thing that reminds me, because when I was a tour guide, today it's there, you don't need tour guides anymore, but this would be something that you should do because you like to move around, you like to apply for papers, you like to do different things. It was so different because you were saying before, you were living other people's fears and you were listening to other people and you were reading and doing these things. This is actually the disadvantage of knowing too much. Today, we know too much.
Yeah.
When I was young, when I was your age, we knew nothing. And we just went somewhere. I remember I used to have no idea where I was going.
Yeah.
And I'm still alive, but because there are so many people knowing so many things and you have so much access to so much knowledge that you at the end know that it's not going to work.
Totally. I 100% believe. And lots of people are like, oh, I wish I had the confidence to do what you've done. Or like, I think it's so cool that you've done it. And like, I don't think it's cool. I just did it because at the end of the day, it's a set of skills. I'd overcome a life-threatening illness. I'd moved out of Bali and started a new life. I'd started several companies that I had no idea, what to do when I first started no one knows this stuff. I didn't know what to do when I'd walked out that ballet school, but I figured it out, At the end of the day, I think any of these things, when you get yourself in tough situations, you go, what resources do I have within me? Even if I have no resources outside of me, what resources do I have within me to solve this problem? And that came against me time and time again, going through this process of moving to Spain. Everything went wrong. Everything I owned got lost in the customs and got stuck in Barcelona for 6 months. So I was living out of literally like a rucksack for 6 months and we couldn't even buy anything. And there weren't any deliveries because it was COVID, it was just a real nightmare. They spelt my name wrong on my documents, so I nearly didn't get my driving license. It's just thing after thing. But it's like you get to the point where it's just another situation that you just overcome. And I think that's one of the great things about traveling. And the more I travel, the more I think it reinforces the ability to be adaptable, the ability to think on your feet, the ability to just use what you got and use what you know, and actually realize that, hey, I have no idea what this says or what this policeman is trying to tell me right now, but you learn ways to figure it out. That I think is a really great skill.
Yeah. And you were saying before, resources within you. And this is also why what you are doing, you could be doing anywhere. I mean, you don't have to be in Spain. You could, it's because we were saying before we started the conversation, the modern word is digital nomad, isn't it? The work you do does not depend on a place. And I think that's quite a fun thing. That's a good thing to do. So what would you recommend somebody who is afraid to do what you did, but still would want to do it? Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, as simple as that. Like I get literally on the daily, I get 2 or 3 messages from people going, oh, I wish I had, some sun. All I want is, I wish I could move abroad. And I'm going to stop wishing about it. Just make it happen. I didn't have a plan. I have no reason to be in Spain. And I still don't have a reason to be in Spain, really, like you said. And I just know that life's very, very short. Life is very, very short. And lots of people really wait for an absolute smash in the face, game-changing tragedy before they actually step up and realize that this is not what I meant to be doing, or I want more, or even it doesn't have to be grandiose. Maybe they just want to, go on a 1-week holiday to Morocco because that's what they've always wanted to do. Like it doesn't have to be life-changing, game-changing, community-changing, but they never do it until they have to. They go through a divorce, they get an illness, someone close to them dies. Stop waiting for, the worst to happen. Mm-hmm. Just get on and do it. The other thing I would also say is if you're someone that is kind of naturally a little bit more risk averse and a bit scared about, what could happen, what can be very, very helpful is actually writing down the worst possible case scenario. Like, what is the worst possible case scenario? And let's avoid, some horrendous, natural disaster or something like that. You're going to be screwed, so I wouldn't worry about it. That, not that kind of worst case, but something like I use up all my money, or my wallet gets lost, or, something like this. And actually, once you've broken down what the real worst case scenario is, you can pretty much see that, okay, if that happened, well, then I'd have to get a loan from, this person would maybe lend me something, or, I'd have to get a short-term job in a cafe or something. You can work out your path out of that. And actually, once you make peace with what could be the worst case scenario, my flight gets cancelled, this gets cancelled, actually, most of the time, our brains are just telling us fibs. Actually, the worst case isn't as bad as you think. That can just be really, really helpful, looking at it from that perspective and flipping the script and knowing that you could get out of that situation, even if it was non-ideal.
Yeah, and everything is better than the worst case.
Yeah, exactly. Only way is up.
But you were saying some people wait or only react when something really bad happens. Some people never do. Yeah. They just spend their whole lives dreaming about something or thinking about something. And there is a book, and I keep talking about this book, and I still don't know the name, but the things that people regret on their deathbed. Yeah. Most of the things that people regret on their deathbed is not the things that they have done. It's the things that they haven't done.
Absolutely. So true. And, actually that goes back to the heart of this conversation, which was one of the big things that I realized was I was looking out the window at the tree outside, because that to me represented all the things I was missing out on. And all that I cared about was getting out into that air and into the wind and feeling the wind on my face and experiencing things that actually I wasn't doing from the confinements of that studio. And I think many people do the same. They feel trapped in their village or their town or even their home country, and they just don't know what they don't know. And I've not traveled the world like I want to yet. I do absolutely intend to go, as far and as broad and as wide and get all those perspectives that I can. But you just got to put yourself out there. And it is a bug, as you well know. Like, once you start traveling and you realize the airports aren't scary, it's just, it catches the bug.
It's my favorite place in the whole world, airports, because I actually start the introduction of my podcast says, my favorite smell is airplane kerosene. and my favorite noise is hearing the champagne cork pop in business class, because once you get to my age, you like to travel business class. But yeah, now let's talk a little bit about business, because since we have you here, we might as well use you a little bit.
Absolutely.
You help people set up companies, or you help people improve their companies when they are in trouble?
Yeah. So what I do, I kind of do a few things. My main focus is in helping businesses scale. So I've been in business development. It started off in the sports space, but now it's broadening out. But I help businesses grow. But I would also say what I do is I don't just build businesses. I really focus on building the entrepreneur as well. So mindset is a huge component for me, as it is for everyone that wants to be anything other than ordinary. If they're going to level up anything in their life, they need to level up their mindset as well. So that's huge for me. So I really focus on scaling business sustainably. Also, I would say that I've been an athlete all my life, and I've run several companies lots of the time at the same time. At the moment, I'm consulting, and I've got 2 other companies as well as another one in process. So I have a lot going on. I like to be able to have the flexibility to work wherever I want to at the times I want to. So what I really help business owners do is take complex life situations and create businesses that don't mean they have to sacrifice any of it. They can still live their life and make, kick-ass income. They can still live their life and make massive impact. And so that's really, really key for me as well.
There are 2 things in life in general, and I think in business especially, is consistency and discipline. And I think being an athlete helps a great deal with those things.
I think it does. I mean, there's definite overlap between entrepreneurs and athletes. Many things. The ability to bounce back from failure, the ability to take on criticism, and the ability to deal with high stress situations, whether that's mental stress, physical stress, or as an entrepreneur, it feels like both a lot of the time. absolutely, that consistency is really key. But more so, I don't really think about being consistent, because it's like sometimes that can be hard and we can put a lot of judgment on ourselves. Oh, I missed this because life happened, or, I didn't stay consistent in my marketing plan or whatever. So I really focus on flipping that, and rather going, how do we make sure you cut out half an hour every day for marketing? I go, how do we make this marketing sustainable for you? So does that mean we need to shift your mindset around what you're doing? Because actually you will stay consistent if you love it. I mean, if someone told you to eat ice cream every day for 7 days, you'd stay consistent because ice cream's amazing, right? But whereas, if someone said, you want to take this disgusting vitamin drink for 7 days, you would push yourself to do it. But by day 14, you wouldn't continue that trend. So it's like, how can we make a sustainable model, a sustainable system? How can we build a business that you love so that consistency doesn't really have to be a problem? I always talk to my clients about this kind of phrase or philosophy, and it's like, what couple of things, 1 to 3 things can you do that makes everything else unimportant, unnecessary, or obsolete? So what can you focus in on which changes the game for everything? So if you focus on creating a marketing model or a sales system that you totally love, that takes care of the consistency, that takes care of the staying, dedicated in your business because you want to do it. So that's something that I bring in as well. Yeah, absolutely. Drawing from things in my sport, where can we focus the quality rather than the quantity and all those things, but also so you can just have freedom to do what you want as well.
Yeah, it's like turning it into a way that you do the things that you like. But does it ever happen to you that you actually come across people and you realize that they're not really made for this?
I think there are. And I think you have to be really honest. Like, not everyone is an entrepreneur, and not everyone is an entrepreneur in the way they see it. And even within being an entrepreneur, there's different aspects of being an entrepreneur. You can be the visionary, which is the kind of traditional entrepreneur that you see on the screen, and they're coming up with business ideas and things. But actually, a visionary, the kind of CEO role, that's not someone that can operate the business, because there's also operators, and there's people that actually make the day-to-day happen and check the finances and actually check that this big idea can even happen from a legal point of view, for example. And then when we have people that are, running the business, we also have scalers, because people that run the business and people that envision the business are not people that can scale your business. And your scaler in your business is normally someone from the outside, or someone that has had a lot of experience that can look down on your business and they can see it from a different perspective. So there's elements of being an entrepreneur where you actually need to relinquish control and go, I'm not the person for this, I'm not the best person for this role, and bring other people in. But there's also a case of going, actually, I'm not an entrepreneur, maybe I'm an intrapreneur. So can I put myself in a company that gives me security, gives me some other benefits, but I can still let that creative spark, which sparked my idea for business anyway, but can I repurpose that in another way? And that's also something I would say I can help people with on occasion, actually helping them guide and navigate. And from my own experiences of finding my truth and my calling and going through that experience of identity shifts. And that is something that I can speak quite truly to as well.
Yeah, because as you said, not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. And I think it's also important to say it once in a while that it's not necessary. You are still a fine person if you are working somewhere and if you are employed somewhere. Because sometimes, we make it sound like you're an idiot if you work for somebody.
Yeah, no, and it's not at all, and also someone has to work for the entrepreneurs, right? Otherwise their business don't work.
Yeah, but I think we have to give people a little credit. And I think the most important thing in life is to be content. And if you are totally stressed out, if you're a skull entrepreneur, I don't see where the being content is. So it's good to think about really what we do and how we do it and why we do it and when. And I think that's why it's good to speak to somebody like you once in a while and find out, what this is really about and how it can be better, or maybe how maybe we should stop it.
I 100% agree. And one thing that I have learned in my journey is no one matters more than you and your truth. Like, really, because people will tell you to do everything and you can become any identity you want. After I left ballet, I then became an elite triathlete, and I was a triathlete first. And then I became, this marketing person. I was all about marketing. And then I was just like, actually, I don't want to be a label. I just want to be me, and I can do it my way. There's a million ways to make £1 million. There's a million ways to travel the world. There's a million kind of identities you can have. You can be Spanish or Swiss or German. You can become anything you want to be. No one can tell you how to live your life. Like, no one can tell you how to live your life, and you really can change and chop and shift. And I look back on what I've done, and no one would have, wrote a plan for me to be a triathlete after falling out of dance, or no one would have written up that I'd ended in Spain. It happened, and I allow myself to fall into that. So I would just say that whatever you want to do, just make it happen, and trust that if it wasn't the right happening, that it doesn't matter. It's not permanent either. You can just chop and change and then make another future, another plan of action. As long as you are staying true to yourself and you focus more than anything on actually not worrying about a label and just calling a spade, and just letting yourself be who you want to be, then you
this
can do
is
anything.
Beautiful. I mean, this would be a good end, but we're not ending yet because time is flying. But I just want to come back a little bit. You about Switzerland. You're thinking maybe of relocating to Switzerland, and you like Switzerland, and Switzerland is my home, so I like to hear it. I like to hear. So
yes.
What's special about Switzerland?
Do you know, I wish I had the answer to that, but again, I'm going to just call it out as being the emotion. Like, I feel something. I think it's the Alps, because I felt the same when I was in Austria. There's something very special about the Swiss and the Austrian Alps that just makes me feel more complete than anything. I've always been a mountain goat. I've always been an outdoorsy girl. I was that kind of ballerina that wore pink in dance class and totted around on point shoes, and then went out and tackled sheep at the weekends because he had a little farm in the countryside. So that's always been part of me, and a real pull for the mountains specifically. When I'm in Switzerland, I feel it's almost like my world slows down. It's like I can take a breath, and my brain, as you can probably hear, works very, very fast all the time. And in Switzerland, it's just, there's a sense of calm and this sense of knowing and the sense of kind of wholeness. And I think also realizing that you and your problems are really quite small, because when you're faced up with those gigantic mountains and you fly over, I mean, the flight from Mallorca to Switzerland is just divine.
Especially when it's sunny and you can see, I know exactly that route. Yes.
Oh, it's just beautiful. And you fly over and you're just like, holy moly, this is just exquisite. And I think all of that together is just so amazing. I also think, hey, I'm super ambitious. I'm an athlete, which means I like to win. I like to win big. And that's kind of the only option. I don't really see, failure as an option. I like going bigger. I like pushing myself. And to me, the cities and the culture in Switzerland is very forwards moving. It's very, it's very fast. It's kind of dynamic. It's very kind of high level. And that to me suggests it's an environment that will help me level up as well. I think your environment is so, so key to determining who you become, how you act, and where you end up, really. And I think, being surrounded with an environment that is pushing forwards, pushing for more. In some cases, I know in other ways, Switzerland is very, very, not a lot happens and everything is very comfortable. But I think in the cities and in Zurich, where I go, it's very kind of, push. Let's see how far we can go here. And I think that's really awesome for this stage of my career as well. To see if I can level up my game.
That would be great fun. And I don't remember who it was, but we were once on a mountain and staying the night, and somebody said, when you are so high up in the Swiss Alps, you feel so much closer to God. Maybe that's one way to explain it.
Absolutely. Or delirious from the altitude at that point, maybe.
Yeah, whatever it is, or wherever he is, or if he exists, or what. But so I really hope that you will make it to Switzerland.
Thank you.
And I also know that wherever you are, you will always make the best of it, because even though you say the environment is important, you were also mentioning that it's the inner qualities, it's what you make with what you have. And I am very, very confident that you are going to go very, very far.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time on Most Memorable Journeys.
And thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for giving such a lovely space to be able to share a bit of my story.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jemima. If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.